Okay, let's talk about Star Wars Squadrons. Now I know EA and Star Wars are both contentious topics, especially when you put them together. However, beyond all the terrible writing, the microtransactions, and the mutilation of our favorite characters that has plagued the Star Wars franchise in recent years, there's still something at the core of Star Wars that old school fans love. Something they want to get back to. And somehow, it seems like someone at EA has begun to find that essence of Star Wars again. Not enough to eliminate my worry about the future of the franchise in EA's hands, and definitely not enough to eliminate my disgust at the predatory monetization practices that they've become infamous for. But they struck on something good last year with Respawn's Jedi Fallen Order, which was a very safe, but very enjoyable Star Wars action-adventure experience. And in some ways, they seem to have done it again with Squadrons, but unlike with Fallen Order, I have some major caveats that I want to share before you run out and buy this title. In my opinion, it's a good, not great, but good, Star Wars experience. And the reason I say good but not great is because I'm averaging out two elements. The actual action combat gameplay side of the game, in other words, the core gameplay loop, and all of the fluff that surrounds it. The characters, the story, the multiplayer options, the campaign, etc. I'm going to keep those two aspects of the game separate to give you as accurate a picture as possible of what this game has to offer. That core gameplay element, the part where you're actually flying around and pew-pewing stuff with your starfighter, that part's really good, if you ask me. The visuals are stellar, and the sound and feel of it is pure Star Wars through and through. And not just any Star Wars, but the Star Wars I grew up with, the era of the original trilogy and the Timothy Zahn books that followed. The game even references Admiral Thrawn at one point, which was exciting, even though those books are no longer canon with this new Disney-fied Star Wars, and the Admiral Thrawn character was reintroduced in newer material. But I digress. If you're like me and you spent your childhood days fighting with invisible lightsabers and flying X-Wings and TIE fighters around the schoolyard with your friends, then you'll probably love the experience of flying these ships, getting feedback and data from the cockpit instruments, and immersing yourself in old-school Star Wars space combat. The level of detail is highly immersive. Damaged ships spark and leave smoke trails. Detailed ship debris litters the battlefield in the wake of a skirmish. If you crash too hard into something, irritating cracks form in your front window. And the targeting and communication systems are fairly in-depth. You can target both enemies and allies and send messages to your team like, attack this, defend that, or help, I need a resupply. The only real area of frustration I had with the core gameplay was the controls, and this is something I've seen echoed in many of the negative reviews that I've read. If you play a lot of these immersive flight combat games and you have a hands-on throttle and stick setup, you might find it particularly frustrating. Apparently there's a real issue with the dead zone of the stick when using the HOTAS, among some other issues, to the point where it's almost unplayable. Now this is something that could be fixed in a patch, and I really hope it is, because of course, a lot of fans of this genre of game are going to have a HOTAS setup. That's really not a part of your potential audience you want to be alienating, EA, just saying. But anyway, I don't use HOTAS, so I first tried playing with a gamepad, and I found that to be nightmarish. There just weren't enough buttons for all the inputs, and the dual thumbstick flight controls just didn't cut it for me. Maybe you'll fare better if you're used to playing this type of game with a controller, but didn't work for me. So I switched over to my mouse and keyboard setup, and then spent some time in the training arena, adjusting mouse sensitivity and some other settings, to the point where controlling the ship started to feel really good. I still feel like it needs a bit of tweaking, but this is where I really started to enjoy the experience, especially in the multiplayer, where you've got an audience and of course don't want to be piloting your ship like a drunk moron. So yes, I'm having a lot of fun with the actual core gameplay of Squadrons, in both the multiplayer and the campaign modes. There's a decent variety of ships and ship customization options, with components that are unlocked as you level up and gain requisition currency. You can also purchase cosmetic upgrades with another currency called Glory, which is earned by completing challenges and leveling up. And guess what? There are no microtransactions. You can't go in and buy extra currency. The only way to unlock things is by actually playing the game. Now, I'll put a major asterisk here, because EA has been known to add microtransactions and loot boxes and the like after the fact. But as of right now, a few days after launch, that's not the case. Alright, so now I'm going to shift gears and talk about things that are outside of that core gameplay experience. All the things that surround the actual experience of flying the starship and shooting things. This is where things start to feel a little thin. As of launch, the multiplayer only has 2 modes, and within those modes, the options and variety of maps are very limited. You've got 5v5 dogfights, and then you've got fleet battles. which are strategic multi-stage battles that culminate in one team destroying the other's capital ship. Again, the number of players in the Fleet Battles mode is limited to 5 per team. There's definitely some room for expansion here, so much so that for a while I almost felt like I was playing an early access title. I'm genuinely surprised they didn't include more modes or options for things like larger matches, or maybe different win conditions, I don't know. I hope they add some of this stuff in eventually. I haven't been able to find any concrete info one way or the other about EA's plans. The one time I'd appreciate a roadmap from you, EA, come on. And then there's the campaign mode, which consists of 14 missions plus the prologue, and it takes about 6 to 8 hours to complete. Now it's a fine enough campaign, the missions are varied and interesting. Obviously there's a lot of dogfighting with other fighters, but they mix it up with different types of objectives in some fairly diverse environments. There are multiple difficulty settings and various achievements on each mission if you care to go for those. Some reviewers have described the campaign mode as a glorified tutorial for the multiplayer. I don't really agree with that sentiment, simply because the missions are robust enough that it doesn't feel like they're just built to service the tutorial elements. But it is a pretty short campaign for the price of the game, so if the multiplayer doesn't interest you, then I definitely recommend waiting for a sale on this one. The actual storyline of the campaign is interesting enough to carry things forward, and there are some pretty good cinematics throughout, but overall it's nothing groundbreaking. You see 2 sides of a particular conflict through the eyes of 2 pilots, one Imperial and one Rebel. There are no choices or RPG elements, the story simply unfolds before you as you accomplish your objectives. Which is unfortunate, since adding in a few RPG elements could have beefed up the story mode considerably. Even a few dialogue options could have added so much. Instead, the dialogue scenes unfold like awkward monologues, with the characters speaking to you in a cliched, overacted manner.
The Empire won't push into our territory again anytime soon.
Thanks to our new pilot.
Yeah, and thanks to the rest of us. This isn't a race, all right? We're a team.
You're right, Gunny. But still, nice flying out there.
You have the opportunity to speak to every member of your 2 squadrons, as well as a few other characters, and some of the backstories are actually kind of interesting. However, the interactions between these characters and you, the player, are so flat and tedious that I got bored of it pretty quick, and I started skipping all of the optional encounters in favor of just getting back into my ship more quickly. And then there's the character creation. Don't even get me started on this one. Actually, I am going to get started because this is a review after all, but I wonder why they even bothered with this. It's basically a pick-a-head creator, and all the heads are human. Did they forget that this is Star Wars? Where are my aliens at? The Rhodians and Twi'leks and whatever Ahsoka is. And the faces they do give you are... Well, thankfully this game is first person, so you don't actually have to see yourself. I kind of feel like these were rejected characters from Mass Effect Andromeda. Okay, I'll admit this one is kind of cute, but still somehow looks less alive and less expressive than C-3PO when he's shut off. Okay, so you pick a face, you pick a, quote, body type, and then you pick one of the stock, cliched voice options. This is probably your most important choice because you actually have to hear it as you play, and then your character name hardly even matters. I mean, it doesn't even translate into the multiplayer. The name seen by other players is your main screen name. Oh, and did I mention that you do this twice? Once for your Imperial pilot and once for your Rebel. So this is why I say that the game is good but not great. The quality of the core gameplay is severely watered down by a lot of the peripheral factors, especially the striking lack of content. So here's a quick recap of the pros and cons. The core gameplay, the flight and combat, is really good. It feels like Star Wars. The visuals and level of detail are fantastic. It has decent ship customization with no microtransactions, and it has fun game modes and campaign missions. However, the campaign is very short, and there's very few multiplayer game modes. The main story beats are okay, but the player interaction with the story is superficial at best, and many of the characters feel flat and wooden, and the character creator is pointless. So here's the verdict. If you absolutely love Star Wars and are dying for a multiplayer space combat game in the vein of the X-Wing series, and you don't mind that the game modes and match options are very limited at this time, then this might be worth the money for you. However, if you want more from your multiplayer experience, then I'd recommend waiting to see if they add more content. If you use a HOTAS, then you might want to wait and see if they patch out the problems that the throttle and stick users are reporting. If you don't trust EA not to add microtransactions or some kind of pay-to-win scheme, then you might want to wait on that too. And if you don't care about the multiplayer and are mostly in it for the single-player campaign, I recommend waiting and picking this game up on sale, maybe when it drops below about $20 US. There's fun to be had in the single-player mode, but that alone is not worth the release price, if you ask me. So if you fall into most of those categories, obviously I'm saying wait to buy, but if you do decide to pick it up and you're a fan of spaceship combat games, you'll probably have some good fun with it. Overall, I feel like this is a step in the right direction for EA and Star Wars, and I'm willing to give it a tentative stamp of approval, with some big caveats and the acknowledgement that there is some serious room for improvement. My biggest hopes are that they add more content to this game, and that things keep heading in the right direction for future Star Wars games. Please slam that like button if you found this review helpful, subscribe for tons more content, and leave comments down below to let me know what you think, especially if you've played the game. I'd be curious to know if you agree. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you later. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, sub, and hit that notification bell, and then check out some of these other videos. Find the link to our Discord server and other important stuff in the description below.
Rotate and serve. And serve.